I stood at my husband's funeral expecting grief. What I got was the revelation that after 42 years of marriage, I wasn't even in his will. People kept coming up to me, squeezing my hand, telling me how sorry they were. I nodded and thanked them, clutching my purse so tight my knuckles turned white. Just hours before the service, the family lawyer had pulled me aside with that awful news. I was still in shock. I watched my son Joseph and daughter Stephanie move through the crowd. Their grief seemed so rehearsed. Joseph shaking hands with Harold's business friends, his face a perfect mask of sadness. Stephanie dabbing at tears that somehow never smudged her expensive makeup. Then Harold's cousin Martha whispered something that made my blood run cold. Such a shame about the house going on the market so quickly. Market? My house? I smiled weakly as the room started to spin around me. Have you ever discovered a betrayal after it was too late to confront the person? Share your experience below. That morning replayed in my head. The family lawyer, Richard, had called me into his office before the funeral. He couldn't look me in the eye as he told me Harold had changed his will 3 months ago. Everything, our home, savings, the business, was now going directly to Joseph and Stephanie. I got nothing. Harold expressed concerns about your financial acumen, Richard had mumbled. I almost laughed. I'd managed our household accounts for decades while Harold ran the business. I paid every bill on time. I tracked every expense. What was he talking about? Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Harold's strange behavior in those final months. Hushed phone calls that stopped when I entered the room. Closed-door meetings with Joseph. That odd comment about securing the family legacy. I thought he was just processing his mortality. I was wrong. At the reception, I noticed Kelly, Harold's executive assistant, watching me from across the room. She'd worked with him for 30 years. The look on her face wasn't pity. It was something else. Almost like she was trying to tell me something. Joseph clinked his glass for attention. Before we continue, he announced, we'll be reading the eulogy Dad personally prepared. This was the first I'd heard about any eulogy. Harold and I hadn't discussed it during his final days. Joseph unfolded a paper and began reading. The words were beautiful. Memories of our life together. Inside jokes only Harold would know, the day we met. Then the final line hit me. Remember, the truth is in the margins, not the balance sheet. It seemed oddly out of place. As guests murmured about the beautiful service, I kept repeating that strange line in my head. Harold had been a businessman through and through. That line about margins felt significant, like he was trying to tell me something. At the reception, Joseph smoothly directed conversations about helping mother transition, while Stephanie chatted about what she planned to do with her childhood bedroom furniture. They talked as if I'd already agreed to leave my own home. I overheard Joseph telling Harold's old business partner they were liquidating assets, while checking his watch. They were discussing my home, my life, as if I weren't standing 15 feet away, as if I were already gone. A family friend approached with a concerned look. "Melissa, have you decided which retirement community you're moving to?" she asked. I froze. Joseph had apparently been discussing my relocation for weeks. Weeks? That evening, alone in what I now learned was no longer my house, I discovered the utilities were already scheduled to be transferred to Joseph's name within days. They weren't wasting any time erasing me. I tried logging into our joint bank account, but the password had been changed. That's when real panic hit me. How would I pay for anything? What was happening to my life? I called Richard, the family lawyer. After some awkward hemming and hawing, he admitted my children had already scheduled an estate sale for the following weekend, while I was still living in the house. My things, my life, on display for strangers to pick through. I wandered into Harold's study and sat in his leather chair, surrounded by photographs of our life together. Had I ever really known this man? 42 years of marriage, and he'd cut me out completely. Who does that? One photo caught my eye. Our 40th anniversary celebration 2 years ago. Looking closer, I noticed Harold's smile seemed forced. His eyes weren't right. When had things started changing? When had he stopped trusting me? Reality hit hard when my credit card was declined ordering dinner. I stared at the error message on my phone. I had been completely cut off financially. After decades of building a life together, I couldn't even buy myself a sandwich. Joseph showed up unannounced the next morning, letting himself in with his own key. "Just checking on you, Mom," he said. But I noticed how his eyes scanned the room, mentally cataloging items for the estate sale. He treated me like a house guest, not his mother. Stephanie called an hour later, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Mom, I was thinking you might be more comfortable in the guest room so we can photograph the master bedroom for the real estate listing." Not even pretending anymore. While searching for any financial documents Harold might have left, I discovered a desk drawer filled with every holiday card and note I'd written him over the years, carefully preserved. It didn't fit the story Joseph was telling, that our marriage had been failing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Hartwell, it's Kelly. We need to talk privately. There are things about the will you need to know. Meet me tomorrow?" My heart raced. Finally, someone might have answers. Joseph stopped by again the next morning, carrying glossy brochures for senior living facilities. "Look at these beautiful communities, Mom," he said, presenting them as if he were doing me a favor rather than kicking me out of my own home. When I asked why everything needed to be sold so quickly, Joseph's smile faltered. "Mom, your name isn't on any of the property deeds. Dad handled all that." Of course he had. I had trusted Harold with those details completely. "Dad was worried about your memory issues," Joseph said, his voice full of fake concern. Memory issues? I'd never had memory problems in my life. This was the first I'd heard of any such thing. They were making me sound incompetent. Stephanie arrived with coffee and muffins, playing the good daughter while Joseph listed everything that needed to go for the estate sale. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure they don't sell your special things," she promised, as if she were doing me a huge favor. As they left, I heard Joseph whisper to Stephanie, "2 more weeks and we're clear." They had a timeline I didn't understand. But one thing was becoming crystal clear. My children were working together against me. I met Kelly at a coffee shop across town the next day. She arrived carrying her trademark leather portfolio, stuffed with papers and sticky notes. She'd been Harold's right hand for decades. If anyone knew the truth, she would. "Mrs. Hartwell, Harold was diagnosed with early cognitive decline a year ago," Kelly said quietly. "He made me his medical proxy because he didn't want to worry you. Joseph found out and used it to his advantage." Kelly leaned forward. "Joseph convinced Harold that you couldn't handle knowing about his condition and shouldn't deal with financial matters. He played on Harold's fears during his confused periods. Joseph showed Harold fake evidence of your financial mistakes, transfers that never happened, bills supposedly unpaid." Kelly's voice was tight with anger. "Harold believed he was protecting you. He was protecting you in his confused state," Kelly explained, "thinking he was preventing you from making mistakes with money you've never made." My stomach turned at the thought of Joseph manipulating his father's illness. Kelly pulled out meeting notes showing Joseph had met with Harold's doctors without my knowledge. He had positioned himself as the responsible son, taking care of business, while painting me as too fragile to handle the truth. I spotted Stephanie entering the cafe, and Kelly and I quickly separated. "Text me later," Kelly whispered, slipping me a small USB drive. "Everything you need is on here." At my friend's house that night, I plugged in the USB. It contained years of company emails, including exchanges where Joseph discussed financial troubles he'd hidden from his father, gambling debts, and failed investments that had left him desperate for cash. One email from Joseph to Stephanie made me physically ill. "Dad's condition is our opportunity. If we wait until he's gone, she'll get everything and we'll spend years in probate." My own children, plotting against me while Harold was still alive. Would you fight against family for what's rightfully yours? Tell me in the comments. Digging deeper, I found documents showing Joseph had used company funds to cover personal expenses, tens of thousands of dollars. No wonder he needed control of the estate before anyone could look at the books too closely. Harold's medical records confirmed his cognitive decline, but also showed it was intermittent. He had many completely lucid days, including the day he recorded his eulogy. That strange line about margins made more sense now. He was trying to tell me something. My phone pinged with a calendar invitation. "Final property assessment at my house tomorrow with a real estate agent. They hadn't even asked me. They were selling my home out from under me without my input or permission. I called Amanda Chen, a young lawyer who had interned for Harold years ago. She now specialized in elder law and estate disputes. I didn't know where else to turn. To my relief, she agreed to meet me right away. Amanda arrived at my friend's house the next morning, taking detailed notes as I explained everything. "This isn't just elder abuse against Harold," she said firmly. "They're financially abusing you too. We can fight this." While reviewing the papers, Amanda noticed something about the eulogy transcript I'd saved. "The formatting is strange," she said, pointing to extra spaces and unusual margin widths. "This doesn't look like standard typing." We were interrupted by a knock at the door. Joseph stood there with a real estate agent, his smile fading fast when he saw Amanda's legal pad and business card on the table. He hadn't expected me to fight back. "We can reschedule the showing," Joseph stammered, but I found my voice. "Actually, Amanda is helping me review some concerning financial discrepancies in the company accounts." His face went pale. The fake pleasantries as Joseph backed out the door were electric with tension. For the first time, I saw real worry crack his perfect facade. He hadn't expected his meek mother to get help. "We need to find Harold's original eulogy document," Amanda said after they left. "That line about truth in the margins, I think he left you a message. The properly formatted version might contain hidden information." I suddenly remembered Harold's habit of writing notes in document margins, a practice from his early career days. He'd make important notes that only he would understand, even in the digital age. Kelly called, her voice urgent. "Joseph is in the office removing files," she reported. "He's told IT to wipe Harold's computer and email archives. I think he's panicking after seeing you with a lawyer." A race began to save evidence before Joseph could destroy it. Kelly downloaded what files she could while Amanda filed an emergency injunction to freeze all estate activities pending investigation. The next morning, I drove to my house to retrieve more personal documents, only to find the locks changed overnight. I couldn't even get into my own home. I called my friend Carol in tears, and she insisted I stay with her until things were sorted out. Word spread quickly through our social circle. Longtime family friends began taking sides, some believing Joseph's smooth talking, others remembering my character over the decades and reaching out with support. Joseph went on the offensive, telling select friends I was struggling with acceptance and experiencing troubling confusion. He was setting the stage to make me look incompetent, just as he'd done with Harold. Through bank alerts on my phone, I discovered personal items were being removed from the house. Family photos, my journals, and financial records I could use to prove my case. They were erasing my history. Kelly managed to find a physical copy of Harold's original eulogy draft in his personal desk drawer at the office. She smuggled it out before Joseph's planned office clean-out and brought it straight to me. Amanda arrived to examine the document. "Look," she said, pointing to Harold's distinctive handwriting in the margins, notes that hadn't been included in the version Joseph read at the funeral. The margin notes contained what looked like a code, locations and dates. I recognized them immediately as significant moments in our marriage, but couldn't understand what Harold was trying to tell me. Then it hit me. Harold had always loved puzzles and codes. For the children's birthdays, he used to create elaborate treasure hunts, hiding the best gifts in plain sight with clues only they would understand. The dates in the margins corresponded to major life events: our wedding, children's births, first home purchase, all representing significant financial and emotional investments we'd made together. The final note referenced our safe deposit box at United First Bank, a box I'd completely forgotten about. We'd opened it jointly on our 25th anniversary but rarely visited it. What could be inside? Amanda drove me to the bank the next morning. The manager initially denied me access until Amanda produced documentation proving the box remained in both our names despite the will changes. Inside the safe deposit box was a sealed envelope marked, "In case of doubt," in Harold's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it to find a letter written 3 weeks before his death. Harold's letter revealed he'd been aware of Joseph's manipulation during a lucid period. He expressed deep regret about changing the will and explained he'd created this backup plan during a moment of clarity. Most importantly, the envelope contained an amendment to the will, properly notarized and witnessed, that reinstated me as primary beneficiary and included provisions to protect the business from Joseph's financial mismanagement. The letter ended with words that broke my heart. Joseph showed me bank statements proving you were hiding money, planning to leave me. I know now these were forgeries. Forgive my weakness in believing him over our 42 years together. As we left the bank, Amanda received an urgent call. Joseph had filed for an emergency competency hearing for me, claiming my delusional behavior required immediate guardianship intervention. He wanted legal control over me. The court date was set for the following week. We had a narrow window to organize our evidence and counterattack before I potentially lost all legal standing to fight for myself. What do you think the secret message in the eulogy means? Drop your theories. When I returned to Carol's house, Stephanie was waiting on the porch. Her eyes were red from crying. "Mom, I had no idea how far Joseph had taken this," she said, claiming she wanted to help. I wasn't sure I believed her. Stephanie revealed Joseph's desperate situation. His gambling debts had attracted dangerous creditors who had begun making threats against the family. He was more than desperate. He was scared. I decided to test Stephanie's sudden change of heart. "We found an amended will document," I said casually, watching her face closely. The genuine shock told me she hadn't known about the safe deposit box. Her shock seemed real, but her next questions, "What exactly does the amendment cover?" revealed her priorities remained self-focused. She wasn't concerned about justice. She was worried about her inheritance. Kelly delivered another bombshell. Company financial records showing Joseph had already transferred significant business assets to offshore accounts only he could access. He'd been planning this for months. Amanda built our legal strategy around both defending against the competency hearing and filing countercharges of fraud, elder abuse, and financial misconduct. We weren't just playing defense anymore. A family friend who was a retired doctor agreed to conduct an independent cognitive assessment to counter Joseph's claims about my mental state. His report showed I was sharper than most people 20 years younger. For the first time, I felt true anger instead of just hurt. It straightened my spine and cleared my thinking. "I raised a thief and a liar," I told Amanda, "but I won't let him steal my life." We discovered Joseph had hired one of the city's most aggressive law firms, known for elder guardianship cases where they took control of seniors' assets. He was spending what should have been my money to fight me. Amanda arranged a meeting with Joseph's lawyer, strategically revealing just enough about our evidence to plant seeds of doubt. Their firm's reputation was too valuable to risk on a client who had lied to them. Kelly managed to get internal emails from Joseph's law firm showing growing concern about significant client misrepresentations that could expose the firm to ethical violations. Joseph's support was crumbling. Family friends called to report Joseph's escalating lies. He was now claiming I had suffered a breakdown at Harold's funeral that necessitated intervention. He was getting desperate as his plan unraveled. Looking through old photographs for the court case, I discovered pictures of company events where I was clearly involved in key decisions, standing beside Harold at property purchases, sitting in on board meetings, reviewing contracts. These photographs directly contradicted Joseph's story that I was just a housewife who knew nothing about the business. They showed me at business meetings and strategy sessions throughout the decades. I had been there all along. The night before the competency hearing, Stephanie showed up unannounced at Carol's house. She was clearly drunk, mascara streaked down her face. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she slurred. Through tears, Stephanie admitted she had initially supported Joseph's plan because he convinced her I would waste the family fortune on cruise ship boyfriends and scammers. The absurdity would have been funny if it wasn't so hurtful. She revealed Joseph planned to sell the company immediately after gaining control, something Harold would never have wanted, and Stephanie hadn't agreed to. It would destroy their father's legacy. "My wellness business is failing," Stephanie confessed, sobbing. "I'm so deep in debt. I needed my inheritance to avoid bankruptcy." Finally, the truth. They had both been driven by financial desperation. I listened silently before responding with newfound strength. "Your father believed I couldn't manage money. Ironic that both his children are financial disasters while I've never missed a payment in my life. The competency hearing began with Joseph's attorney painting me as a grieving widow experiencing cognitive decline. He used twisted, out-of-context examples and statements from people I barely knew. I sat with my back straight, dressed in my best suit, making careful notes throughout the proceedings. Not exactly the picture of confusion they were trying to paint, the judge noticed. When my cognitive assessment results were introduced, showing above-average function in all areas, Joseph visibly paled. The judge questioned why no medical evaluation had been conducted before filing such serious allegations. Amanda introduced the amended will, Harold's letter, and called Kelly as a surprise witness. Kelly testified about Joseph's systematic campaign to manipulate his father during periods of cognitive vulnerability. Surprised by who's really behind this betrayal? Hit like and share this video. The judge, clearly disturbed by the evidence, dismissed the competency petition immediately. She referred the matter for potential criminal investigation, leaving Joseph exposed to scrutiny beyond just family court. Outside the courtroom, local business reporters, tipped off by Amanda's strategic press contacts, waited to question Joseph about the financial irregularities mentioned during testimony. His carefully crafted public image was at risk. Surrounded by Kelly, Amanda, and Carol, I felt a moment of clarity. This fight wasn't just about money or even justice. It was about reclaiming my narrative and my place in the world after decades in the background. Joseph approached me privately as we left, suggesting a settlement that would divide assets reasonably while keeping family matters out of the public eye. Still trying to control the situation, still thinking only of himself. My response marked my complete transformation. You'll receive exactly what the amended will provides. No more, no less. Your father's legacy will be protected, even from his son. His face showed he finally understood I meant business. We scheduled a family meeting at the house, now legally restored to me, to discuss final arrangements. Joseph arrived unaware that I had prepared my own strategic counteroffensive, and that Stephanie had switched allegiances. I arrived early to find Joseph had already removed valuable items, creating an inventory discrepancy he couldn't explain. His scrambling excuses only dug his hole deeper. The meeting began with Joseph confidently discussing next steps, until I calmly placed Harold's letter, the amended will, and evidence of financial misappropriation on the dining room table. Before we discuss arrangements, I said with newfound authority, let's address the $2.3 million you've transferred from company accounts into your personal offshore holdings. The color drained from his face. Joseph tried to dismiss the accusation until Stephanie surprisingly spoke up, producing additional evidence she'd gathered after our late-night conversation. The siblings' united front collapsed instantly. Joseph and Stephanie turned on each other, revealing schemes and manipulations neither Harold nor I had known about. Years of resentment and rivalry poured out as they tried to shift blame. I simply sat back and took notes while occasionally asking pointed questions that exposed further contradictions. Every answer they gave just revealed more deception. When Joseph tried to storm out, he found Amanda and the company's longtime financial officer waiting in the hallway with even more documentation of financial improprieties. There was no escape. Returning to the table defeated, Joseph finally admitted manipulating his father's perceptions, but insisted he did it to protect the company from my supposed incompetence. Still unable to admit the simple truth, I quietly reminded him that my accounting background had kept the family afloat during multiple recessions, while his risky ventures consistently lost money. Harold may have been the face of the business, but I had always been its financial backbone. I presented my terms. Joseph could remain with the company under strict financial oversight or face prosecution for fraud and elder abuse. It was more mercy than he deserved, but he was still my son. Stephanie tearfully accepted similar terms with additional requirements to enter financial counseling and contribute meaningfully to the business rather than simply collecting dividends. It was time for both my children to grow up. As they left, humbled and resentful but legally bound to the new arrangement, I remained in Harold's study, now my study. Finally, I allowed myself to grieve both my husband and the family relationships I thought I had. Kelly arrived later with the company's original business plan. written in both Harold's and my handwriting. It was physical proof of my foundational role in building the legacy my children tried to steal from me. Together, we found a final message Harold had left in his private journal. Melissa was always the backbone of everything I built. Without her strength, nothing I achieved would have been possible. Vindication, at last. In the days that followed, I began formally documenting my historical contributions to the company, creating an undeniable record for future generations. My role would not be erased again. I established clear boundaries with my children. Professional respect was required for continued involvement with the family business. Personal reconciliation would be a separate, longer journey, if it happened at all. The house that was nearly sold from under me became a symbol of my reclamation. I redecorated spaces that had remained unchanged for decades, physically manifesting my emotional renovation. Business associates who had distanced themselves after Harold's death cautiously reconnected. Many seemed surprised to discover my comprehensive understanding of operations and industry relationships. I had been paying attention all along. A particularly satisfying moment came when Joseph's former allies began approaching me directly for business decisions, recognizing where true authority now resided. The power had shifted permanently. They never expected her to discover the truth. What would you have done differently? At the first board meeting after everything settled, I arrived early and sat confidently at the head of the table, my physical position symbolizing my reclaimed status. No more sidelines for me. Joseph and Stephanie entered separately, tension obvious between them as they competed for the diminished influence they now shared under my oversight. They had become rivals instead of conspirators. When a board member unconsciously directed a financial question to Joseph out of habit, I calmly interceded. I'll address that. My quiet authority needed no shouting or drama to be effective. The meeting proceeded with me systematically correcting years of financial mismanagement. I watched as my quiet competence gradually earned reluctant respect, even from those who had underestimated me from the beginning. After the board overwhelmingly approved my recovery strategy, Joseph approached with an awkward attempt at reconciliation, still centered entirely on himself rather than acknowledging the harm he'd caused. I responded with firm compassion. I'm your mother first, your boss second. Both roles require honesty I haven't seen yet. When you're ready to offer that, we can begin rebuilding. The ball was in his court. That evening, I hosted a small dinner for the allies who stood by me, Kelly, Amanda, and the few friends who never doubted my competence or character. These were my true family now. During dinner, I announced the establishment of a foundation in Harold's name focused on elder justice and financial literacy for women. I would transform my painful experience into something that helped others. Amanda raised her glass. To Melissa, who taught us all that true inheritance isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity, determination, and the courage to reclaim your own story. I couldn't have said it better myself. 6 months later, I sat in what was now definitely my office, reviewing quarterly reports that showed company performance improving under my guidance. The business was thriving with proper oversight. I kept Harold's photograph on my desk alongside a framed copy of his final letter, not as a shrine to the past, but as a reminder of both vulnerability and vindication. We all have blind spots, even with those we love most. Joseph had begun showing genuine change, attending therapy and financial management classes. Occasionally, he even asked for advice in a tone that suggested growing respect. Small steps, but progress. Stephanie's wellness business had been restructured with my guidance into a legitimate enterprise, creating a healthier channel for her need for validation. She was finding her own path instead of trying to take mine. I often reflected on how grief had transformed into an unexpected path to self-discovery, how losing everything became the catalyst for finally claiming what was always mine. Sometimes we need to lose it all to find ourselves. I received an invitation to speak at a women's business leadership conference, my first public recognition as the business force I had always been behind the scenes. No more shadows for me. The talk I prepared didn't dwell on betrayal, but focused on resilience. How to recognize your own value even when those closest to you fail to see it. That's the message that really matters. The greatest inheritance isn't what's left to you, I plan to tell them, but what you discover within yourself when everything else is taken away. That was the truth I needed to share. As I practiced my speech, I noticed how my reflection had changed. My posture straighter, my eyes clearer, my presence more commanding than at any point in my 67 years. I had finally become fully myself. Has someone's final words ever changed your life? Comment and share your story.